What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into another episode of Mika Says Sukas. And I do have a very, very special guest. Me and him did a podcast on Mike Sonato's podcast. And we kind of came to the conclusion that it has been far too long without us doing a show together or having an interview. And so I invited him onto my channel, and I'll be going on to his very shortly. I want to welcome Nick Brana. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah, it's good to talk to you, Niko.
Yeah, same here, same here. I know we kept crossing paths at the People Summit, but we were both incredibly busy. You were like running around with the chicken with your head cut off, man. Your heart got to keep up with, but it's okay. It's always good to stay busy. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what were you doing before the Draft Bernie thing? I think that would help people get a better understanding of why you decided to initiate Draft Bernie.
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, a little bit of background before that. We began as Draft Bernie in February 2017, so almost a year ago, a little more than a year ago now. And we launched that as a bunch of Sanders staffers, delegates, and super volunteers to get Bernie to start a new party. And in November, we had built up, you know, so much support across the country that we transitioned to Movement for a People's Party, and that's where we are now. And so so what we're doing now is we're building a coalition for a major new party, progressive party in the U.S. You know, and we could talk more about why we need that later.
Yeah.
But as for me, I studied sociology at William and Mary.
Really?
And
what year did you graduate?
2011.
Oh, okay. So you were there before I started. I did debate with a lot of kids. One of my really good friends, Aaron Murphy, was from William and Mary. So I was curious. Were you in APTA?
In what?
In APTA, the American Parliamentary.
I wasn't.
I'm surprised because you seem like an APTA kind of kid, but it's a good thing. It's a compliment mostly. But go ahead.
But I mean, like from when I got there, I was interested in, and when I studied sociology, I was interested in how change happens in society, you know, and how can I participate in affecting that change? And to begin with, that took me right after I graduated to the Democratic Party, and so I started working on campaigns. I worked on the Hill. I worked at an environmental NGO, and at first in establishment politics. So if we're working for Terry McAuliffe, for example, you know,
that's about as establishment as you can get right there.
Exactly. And that was his 2013 gubernatorial campaign where, you know, it was Robbie Mook and and Bryn Craig and Michael Halley and all of these folks who ended up running the Hillary campaign in 2016.
Oh, you saw that pattern really fast, huh?
I saw that. They actually used the Terry McAuliffe campaign as kind of like a testing ground for what they wanted to do in the Hillary campaign in the next presidential.
I actually found that out from he used to be the leader of the North Carolina Democratic Party. He used to be the executive director, and him and Terry McAuliffe did not get along because Hillary, believe it or not, is in North Carolina a lot. Like one of her stomping grounds in North Carolina because Monsanto is there in Research Triangle Park. So I got to see a lot of her, I hear a lot about her just by virtue of being at UNC. So yeah, it's crazy what the Great Awakening, I guess a lot of us had, especially people, you know, around our age range. It's kind of hard to have to re-examine everything you thought you understood about politics.
It is. I was one of the people who inspired me into politics, you know, originally. It's like I was really motivated by Obama's campaign in 2008. You know, I thought I had already kind of, you know, wanted to go into politics, and his campaign in 2008 was kind of one of those things that, you know, he was saying all the right things, as we know now, but not doing any of the right things, you know?
Yeah. So I think I feel the same way. I think the one good thing, if Obama did anything, he did make us feel like politics was accessible to anybody. And I think what Bernie Sanders solidified was that not only is politics accessible to everybody and anybody, but you can be good. you can be a good politician. You don't have to be perfect, and just because there's no way you're going to be perfect, because at the end of the day, we're influenced by our personal backgrounds, and also we're victims of what we have in front of us. So we can only make decisions based off of what we thought was right at the time, based off the evidence in front of us. Like, one of the things that I always critique is Bernie Sanders, his Gaza Strip, voting to bomb the Gaza Strip a long time ago. I think it was literally at this point over a decade ago. But it's easy for me to look back and critique it because we already have the benefit of hindsight. However, at that time, I was on the side of the world because of being raised in a conservative state that Israel was the victim, and I didn't question it. And based off of the research that we had available to us and the things that we were being told, everybody thought, most of the people in the country thought that Israel were the victims. And then look what happened, right? So you don't have to be perfect, but politics, I feel like you can like, even though Obama did get a lot of young people motivated, like you and me, I think that Bernie's kind of solidified that you can still be good. You can have good intentions in politics. So I'm glad for that. So so Obama activated you, and then what happened next? How did you get involved with the Bernie Sanders campaign? If you were involved, did you volunteer? Did you work for them?
I worked for him, yeah. And so after working on the Terry McAuliffe campaign for governor, where I was deputy director of voter protection, and then after working on John Kerry's PAC as well, those experiences really told me that establishment Democratic politics, was never going to be the way that change was going to happen, and so after that, I got involved in Bernie's campaign, where I was the national political outreach coordinator. So it was my job to lobby the superdelegates for Bernie, and arrange his political meetings and that kind of thing, get political support from electeds and allied organizations.
You did a damn good job, man. You did a damn good job. I mean, it didn't go perfect, but you brought a lot more people in than I think that people would give you credit for. I didn't know that you were in charge of that. So I want to give you a personal thank you. I'm sure a lot of other people feel the same way. It's a difficult job.
Thank you. Yeah. It was a very difficult job. It was to have to work with the political establishment, after joining kind of Bernie's radical campaign was not.
That's kind of funny.
But I mean, that experience, and then what I did after that is, help found Our Revolution too. I was the first electoral manager there. And those two experiences combined with what I did with Terry McAuliffe, John Kerry, and working in establishment Democratic politics, it taught me, as part of, the evolution as a whole that I think so many of us, have gone through politically, and coming to the conclusion that the Democratic Party itself, is incapable of making the kinds of changes that we need, the kinds of changes we fought for on the Bernie campaign.
So there's something that speaks to me a little bit, especially because I didn't even know you had that much experience with Bernie. I thought I was speaking from firsthand experience. You got some serious firsthand experience. So as somebody who's worked inside of the establishment, like, you're not like Bernie who was trying to like maneuver around it. You were there. You were inside of the establishment to the point where it made you totally change how you went about approaching politics. And Bernie, obviously, I think he knows the establishment, but I also think that there's a level of like outsiderness that he doesn't even realize that he's been subjected to for all this time. Because, I can trust you to help get legislation passed for me, but I can't necessarily trust you with a political secret, for example. You know what I'm saying? Not like a huge one, but something that could be a life or death situation in an election. And so you are under the firm belief that the Democratic Party is just not the party of the future, and it is not going to be the party of the future based on your experiences.
Absolutely. Based on my experiences and what I had the opportunity to research before I joined Bernie, after I joined Bernie too, I found that we're in the midst of this great transition politically in this country. Mm-hmm. So in the past 15 years, tens of millions of people have left the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Party affiliation has come down from about 35% each to 25 to 27% each. And these folks are all becoming independents. And so it's a massive wave and movement into independent status. At the same time, the number of people who are calling for a major new party has shot up to record highs. It's 61% now. It's never been that high before. And also the number of people who say that they've lost confidence in basic institutions, that's also kind of gone down.
Skyrocketed at this point.
That it is. Yeah, that's right. People, like, you get those embarrassing figures like single digit, 9% of people have confidence in Congress and that kind of thing.
That's pretty
and the
standard,
newspapers, television news, big business banks, it's all, it's all plummeted.
We don't trust anything that's in front of us anymore. And that's actually a fantastic thing, because you can't find a solution until you truly understand that you have a problem. So
I completely agree. Yeah. And so, over those past 15 years, it's been a massive loss of confidence in the establishment and in the two parties that enforce it. And so, what we're moving to kind of as a society and politically is we're moving towards a political alternative. We're moving towards an independent party. The American people are. And the case that we're making as Movement for a People's Party is that rather than struggle against that and try to contain that, and hold people inside the sinking ship of the Titanic that is the Democratic Party, we should rather embrace that and say, let's go with the people and build that.
See, and I like your approach, because a lot of people see the thing about starting a new party is you have a few obstacles. I would say that the main one is that people are like, who the hell are you and how can we trust you? And so I'm glad that you had that experience and those connections. Like, look, I understand I'm not Bernie, but this is what I've experienced and this is why I think we should transition. And I don't think you were making an insane proposal. Personally, I do understand that we do have obstacles that we have to overcome, like in order for a third party to be viable. However, that's simply poking a hole. We should not just stop building up a third party because there are other obstacles. We're human beings. We're pretty smart and we're capable of multitasking. And so at that point, like you said, why push back against the wave instead of just going with it?
Exactly. Another thing that, that motivates us too, is that in looking into our own history, one of the lessons that we kind of took was that the way that all of basically the progressive policies, landmark policies that we now cherish as kind of staples of our, society, a lot of them were passed with third-party progressive pressure. And so it wasn't enough for there to be a push for it inside the Democratic or Republican parties or inside an establishment party. It took an element of outside electoral pressure. Yep. And so, for example,
Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party, and also Lincoln and the Republican Party with abolition, with women's suffrage, with Populist Party as well, and the People's Party. There was a People's Party back then that was very influential. Mm-hmm. And it was the same story with child labor laws, and the FDA, the New Deal, the direct election of senators, the 40-hour work week. And so all of these policies had independent party pressure that, was the impetus behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people really, especially who are entrenched in the Democratic Party, or maybe they don't think that. Maybe that's why they want to stay. But I think there's this misconception that the Democrats have done literally. I mean, even when we want to go back to when they were the Republicans, they haven't done anything for us. What ends up happening is people end up fighting for what they want. The Democrats play political games in Congress and in the legislature, and then we end up having to fight our way all the way to the Supreme Court. And after we pull the legwork, the third parties, do their lobbying, and people get pissed off enough that it then is about to affect the elections. We get it done. Like, I always use the example of people think that for some reason interracial marriage is like a Democrat. No, that's a us thing. We did that. Hell, equal rights for marriage at this very moment was a us thing. I had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Jim Crow, it literally took multiple people getting assassinated and speaking up. The Democratic Party didn't speak up. MLK had to speak up. Huey P. Newton had to speak up. Rosa Parks had to sit down. it was us who pressure the party. One thing that funny enough, the one thing that Republicans don't have to worry about is passing something that is against their personal ideology, because they are literally like, it is because of a long-standing traditions in those areas, but they get pulled straight out of their ideology. All they gotta do is say exactly what everybody else wants to say and try to give the aura that they're not establishment. That's it. But for the Democrats, it's a little bit more complex. They have to keep a carrot in front of us because they understand that the only reason that the Democratic Party became famous and successful at any point was because not only of some of the glaring failures of the Republican Party, but also because they gave us the idea that they were going to be different than the Republican Party in some instance outside of just, words. So I'm glad that you kind of have figured that out, because a lot of people have not.
That's so true. And, I think that looking at this from the perspective of the oligarchs themselves is also very revealing. And so, if you just think of an oligarchy as unequal as our country is now, and a 2015 study from Princeton and Northwestern actually concluded that, we don't even meet the definition of democracy anymore. We're literally an oligarchy. They said that the preferences of the public literally has zero effect on the policies that are passed, And so I think if you looking at this from the perspective of the oligarchs and saying, how do you maintain that system? A system where, just a tiny few are running the country and managing everything, and yet while maintaining the facade of democracy. And in order to do that, you have to have, in order to prevent the left from kind of capsizing that boat, you have to have some kind of institution, a party that masquerades as a party of the left, and that can harness the energy of the left, and that, can suck it up like a black hole, basically, but ensure that all of that energy never really amounts to a change in the character of the party or a change in the character of the country. Without that kind of organization, no oligarchy, no society as unequal as ours would last. It would collapse immediately. Absolutely. And so that's precisely what the Democrats are, in our country.
So, and I want to ask your opinion about something, because and feel free not to answer if you don't want to. But so I live in Broward County, where the Parkland shooting happened, and contrary to what a lot of people thought I was going to say, I actually said, because some people were talking about that they didn't happen, which is not true. By the way, people, it did happen. But what I said was, here was where my issue started. The moment that 3 kids were verified on Twitter within 2 days, had millions of followers out of nowhere. Mind you, Twitter pretty much, they reneged on their on them not verifying anybody they started like in November because of these children. They have a 501c3, 501c4 nonprofit ready to go. They have, marches organized in days, simultaneously in DC, Tallahassee, which is the capital of Florida, in other places. They managed to help organize the school march. Turns out the person who helped organize the school march was on the executive of the Women's March. The Women's March immediately gets involved. Don't know what they did, but they at least co-signed it. And then when you think about it, at the end of the day, they scapegoat the NRA. All we see on the news is all about what Republicans aren't doing. Did the Democrats actually introduce any substantive legislation?
Yeah, no.
All exactly. That, right? For all the effort they put into financing that, because it came out later that it was AstroTurf. Debbie Wasserman Schultz helped buy the buses and a lot of the things that happened down here. And it came out. Local news is crazy in Florida. You should look at it sometime. And you see some stuff and then you're like, what? Yeah, they help fund that entire situation. And here's the worst part. Twitter helped them. And it's scary because I was watching how much CIA is involved in Silicon Valley. And it's becoming painfully obvious that like the Democrats aren't just a party of the CIA. I mean, they are the party of the deep state or the shadow government that we're trying to fight against and push back against every day. The government that is influencing some of the things that Bernie says because he can't run and they'll block him from doing X, Y, Z. And so he has to say certain things so he can caveat to be like, but look, we shouldn't go to war in Syria, although I don't like what Assad is doing. I don't agree with him about Assad, But I do agree that no matter what side of the fence you stand on, we have way too much going on. And that's the important takeaway, I think, from things like that he says. But on the other side of that fence, I think that would be the perfect example of what you're talking about, which is there's no viability. There's no way that people don't recognize the amount of inequity in this country unless you do things like that. Because that was a huge distraction for about a good 3 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the media just tends to jump from distraction to distraction. But, that's a really, it's a really interesting and I think a really important story that you brought up recently. I think you were alluding to that, is that some good research has been done recently about how many people who are running inside the Democratic Party, how many of the establishment candidates actually come straight out of the CIA or straight out of the State Department.
Yeah, I actually was talking about that. Was it on Mike's podcast? Maybe.
I don't think so, but it's fascinating research. Another thing that is happening on top of that is yesterday the results came in from Illinois primary.
I heard it was not pretty.
Now it wasn't. It was it was kind of a slaughter for progressives, unfortunately. And I don't think that's because they're lacking in support. I think it's because they're exactly. Issue poll after issue poll shows that whether it's Medicare for all or free public college, people are with progressives.
Look at Sima Hernandez senatorial primary in Texas. If you look at that map, she almost beat and that there was cheating involved, but she managed to win I think it was either San Antonio or Houston. She pretty much, which if you think about that, that's insane for a progressive, fringe candidate to come out and get 30 to 35% of the vote in a 4-person race in a Democratic primary. And it looked as if you know how the Democratic Party does. It's their primary, right? And so and of course they send out the DC, the DCCC, send out those letters, those nice little, hey guys, we just want to let you know, don't attack your opponent and make sure you go on a unity tour with them after it's all said and done. And by the way, we've already decided who we're backing. We've already decided who we're funding. We've actually already funded this, the one that we want to win. Hey, but I need you to not attack anybody for that, or else we're going to make sure you can't run again. When you're running with that type of how can you hope to win outside of being in an off year like this? And even still, look what happened in Illinois, like you said.
Yeah.
There's no beating that party.
It's billionaire versus billionaire now for the governor's race, a Democratic billionaire and a Republican billionaire, and this is actually just part of a trend. It's happening elsewhere in the Democratic Party too. So it's not just people, from the intelligence agencies who are actually running inside the Democratic Party, but it is the Democratic Party loves people who self-finance, and those, that's their key phrase. And so that's why they put Stephen Biddle, another real estate billionaire. Man. They put him into the Florida chair. Exactly.
I remember.
That's why they have Tom Steyer, who's thinking about running for president, as another billionaire. And so they supported Jim Justice in West Virginia in 2016 as a billionaire coal baron, and he promptly switched parties.
Talk about antiquated. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, man. It's embarrassing.
So speaking of finance, so in the beginning when you first started draft Bernie, you took pledges. I remember that distinctively, and I was really impressed by how many people pledged. People were really excited, and I think part of it, a large amount of it was, oh, okay, we can get Bernie to a third party. But I think what was much more impressive to everybody else was the concerted effort and really success that you had building this solid coalition in a legitimate third party that at times, and Nick can attest to this, everybody close to Bernie was rooting for him joining your party. If I recall, at the People's Summit, they made that pretty clear, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had Jane was tweeting us favorably. Nina Turner, gave an interview with Jimmy Dore where she was like, Bernie, do it. I hope he does it.
Yeah, she just said the same thing on Tim Black show. She was, and what Roseanne comes up on stage and was like, "Oh no, we want him to go to draft Bernie. I'm on y'all."
That was awesome. That was epic in front of everyone and in front of
everybody, which was interesting because I know that for you kind of had to be a little unsettled about how that was going to go whenever everybody threw up the draft Bernie signs.
Yeah, I mean, we had decided we were going to do it, one way or the other. We had no idea exactly what it was going to turn out, but it turned out to be this amazing moment where, Roseanne said right on stage to him, Bernie, like, exactly, to the draft Bernie folks, thank you, you ought to do it, Bernie. And that heroes aren't made, they're cornered.
That's definitely right. Seriously. So when you were getting, going through the issues that everybody goes through, I feel like, especially on the left when they're starting a party, because the left is sometimes too damn smart for their own good, but not smart enough to look at the obvious. What was the biggest challenges for you? What pushbacks did you have?
You mean in trying to start a new party?
Well, and trying to start the new party and trying to convince people from the left to join that party, the naysay, like what were the naysayers saying?
Well, obviously some people defend the Democratic Party, and they say, oh, we should just reform the Democrats. Mm-hmm. There's, we've put out a lot of material, a lot of historical resources about why we don't think, that hasn't produced results in the past. It's as progressives, we kind of recognize why a monopoly doesn't serve consumers when it comes to economics. Well, it's the same dynamic when it comes to politics. If you have right now, we have a duopoly, and the Democrats have a monopoly over the left, essentially, which gives them very little incentive to change. And then the other thing, looking at this again from the perspective of the oligarchs, they kind of, and those who are running the Democratic Party, those who fund it, which are often the same people who fund the Republican Party, they kind of face a choice with the Democratic Party. They say, well, we can, those high-level Democrats running the party, we can either change, embrace progressive policies, and then get progressive votes, but we will all lose the long-term revolving door jobs, which we've all been, invested many years in working towards, because after they leave the Democratic or Republican Party, they go to Wall Street, they go to K Street, they become lobbyists.
MSNBC.
Or MSNBC or the Washington Post, and they cash out,
for the rest of their lives. Yep.
And so that's kind of, so they have that choice. They say, all right, if we embrace progressive policies there, but and then they say, well, if we turn it down, we get the billionaire money, we get the big money, we get to keep our own personal revolving door jobs, and after some complaining, we get the progressive votes anyways.
Yeah.
So it's like,
after they scapegoat somebody, they just got to scapegoat enough, and then the votes is,
So it's like they're making the rational choice. The Democratic Party.
The rational, individualistic choice, yes.
For them personally, that's right. Ignoring all of what's best for people, ignoring like what's best for society, but just thinking about what's best for them, and what's best for the party and their position,
Yeah, and I would say this.
Making the rational choice. We got to change that.
So funny that, like, I don't have a lot of compliments about the Republican Party, but the one thing I can compliment them on is they at least recognize when their self-interest is about to go straight out the window. Like, whenever Trump won the Republican primary, which he did so fair and square, by the way, no matter what you can say about the Republican Party, they legitimately want the best person and the most viable candidate to win, because they know what happens when you don't run the most viable candidate. To the degree that in 2004, they ran a candidate against Bush because of how unpopular he was, just to make sure that they made the right decision or that he was going to be the most viable candidate to win the presidency. So after everything was said and done, how much trash did they talk about Trump? how much like Fox News was trashing Trump. But when he won that nomination, they said, what do y'all want again? Whatever, Trump, give them what they want. We bow down to you. You're the one in charge. You won fair and square. We can figure out our beef with you later, but let's make sure we win these elections first before we figure out what to do with you. The Democratic Party didn't even have the sense enough to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's because there's a crucial difference between populists in the Democratic Party and populists in the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And so Trump, as a populist in the Republican Party, he's a billionaire himself, you know? Look at the tax cuts. Look, I mean, he doesn't threaten Wall Street. He's a bonanza to Wall Street.
He does threaten, I will say this, he does threaten overseas interests. Like our international, like with the tariffs, he's trying to put tariffs out. So he doesn't threaten Wall Street, but he does threaten some people, if you will.
That's true. There is kind of a faction of the elite, exactly. You know, the Hillary Clinton type aligned, you know, State Department type faction.
Literally made all their money by playing political games internationally with Ukraine and Saudi Arabia and Israel and all these different countries, and mainly countries that we trade with. Trump, like he's doing a steel tariff, for example. That's going to actually help Americans. But a lot of people who don't like that are in the usually in the Democratic elite, but they're all really establishment at the end of the day. I don't give a damn what they call themselves, Democrat or Republican. Once you get to a certain level and you've been there for that long and you still have the name Democrat or Republican, like Nancy Pelosi's a damn Republican.
Right.
But she knows the same thing as Hillary knows. In the Republican Party, a woman is not going to get as far as quickly as she would in the Democratic Party. So that's how we have a lot of these conservative, older white women who end up becoming Democrats. And they co-opt that message and have used it against us and against the people who look just like they do and go through the same struggles as they do, but are leaving them in the dust as far as the promises that they make to them. And that glass ceiling that could have been broken, all she had to, you know what's funny about that? I think if Hillary legitimately would have went left, people would have voted for her.
Oh, I think so too. Absolutely. And not even like all the way to Bernie, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Just show us that you're movable, but do what everybody else did before. Just lie and we'll figure out how to impeach you later. Or at least how to make sure you don't win. But and it's funny because she's so great at lying, but she's so insincere. She had been so committed her entire career to towing the line rhetorically that she screwed herself trying to hold the line. Well, you know, I never said that I was for TPP, except for all those times I said that I was for TPP. And then of course, like she tried to refuse to bring up TPP during the general, if anybody caught that. But Trump kept nailing her to the wall. I'm like, oh, you can't forget, because you did say that. And all you had to do is say, well, you know what? I'm going to reconsider it because I don't think that that's the right plan. I stick by what I said during the primary. I changed my mind, and it can be much better for Americans to get a better deal out of it. Not let's work on it and see what happens. Like, no, It's not let's work on it. No, it's if that's not what's good for the people, then just say it's not going to happen. But she just can't bring herself to be absolute and conclusive in a point that she's trying to make. She can't do it, which is total opposite of Trump and Bernie. They both have the ability to be like, nope, I don't believe this, period. End of story. So I thought it was interesting. Like I said, they ran the wrong candidate.
Oh, they did. And they still haven't admitted it, you know, and that they've done all kinds of like mental gymnastics to try to avoid admitting it. But if you're the donor class and you fund both parties, you know, then your only real threat is especially if a progressive populist wins in one of those two parties, you know, or if they win the nomination. If two establishment candidates win, you've won as soon as the primaries are over, basically, you know?
We're already thinking about the next election after two establishments win.
Right. And so it's like, all right, that one's done, you know? And so that's why I think the people who fund the Democratic and the Republican parties, they would rather have a weak Democratic candidate if that's what it takes to defeat a progressive in their primary, whatever it takes to defeat a progressive in the Democratic primary, because then that weak establishment Democrat like Hillary just ends up going against a Republican, a pro-business Republican,
But they're
and
losing,
the status,
and they haven't even gotten that part yet.
Right. And they lose, but, and the Democrats lose, but the donors win because they control both parties, and so as long as both candidates, are establishment, doesn't matter. They've already won.
And here's what's even more interesting about that strategically. And considering you've been involved in strategy for so long at this point, I think you would probably agree. How long do you think it takes the donors to realize, holy shit, you're not even a viable party anymore? I don't have to pay you. I just pay the Republican more to beat your ass.
Well, that's really, it's really funny because the DNC started this year with $400,000. The RNC started with 40 million.
I know.
They're
Trump isn't even fundraising for them. He's not even fundraising. Like they try to, get, well, not Obama as much, but Hillary and all their little superstars, Senator Warren, doesn't matter what they do. And literally, and I don't even believe, I don't think they got 400,000 from the people. I think it happened a little bit. They fundraised during that lockout. That was pointless. It was literally a fundraising tactic. And it also was used to distract the world from the fact that Tillerson just announced that we were going back in Syria indefinitely. So people don't even realize, at that point, Schumer already gave them the wall. He already gave them DACA. They pretended like there was something going to change on DACA. No, he already gave them DACA. There was literally nothing in that bill that was worth locking out the government. But it was a nice little distraction, a nice little fundraising tool for both parties, mind you, for both parties. But like I said, at the end of the day, Trump won the election based off of getting more people, more conservative or right-leaning independents to join the Republican Party. When you won your primary by suppressing as many people as possible, you're trying to use a Republican tactic to beat the Republican. Like every negative thing that a leftist person can say about the Republican Party, Trump embodied that. But that seems like, so obvious that we know the obvious decision. No, that means he's about to beat whoever's ass comes up unless they are the total antithesis of that. And Hillary was not that.
Yeah.
and go ahead.
And Hillary, Trump ran and won, I think, by running as Bernie, in a lot of ways against TPP, challenging money in politics, challenging Hillary and the Democratic Party establishment's corruption, and so in so many ways, he ran a populist campaign that overlapped with a lot of things that Bernie was saying. Obviously, he didn't mean any of it, and he's retracted all of it. They're even talking about bringing back TPP, which was super pretty. So, but
he's been on and off about it. He's been weird about that. I don't like that though. I had to do a video about that the other day. I'm like, oh, bro, you just try to slide that TPP right back in there, didn't you?
I think they're just going to give it a new name and they're going to bring it right back. And Trump's going to be like, I negotiated a better deal. And now it's called the TTTP, or whatever.
That's true. And I hope that's not the case. But also, I would say this, though. He's done a lot of firings recently. And I think that there were people, based on the articles that I read, they're trying to convince him to negotiate and get into TPP. You can tell that he doesn't know if he should do it or not, just based off, like I said, these are based off the comments. He doesn't know. But the problem is Trump doesn't know who he can trust in office no more. And that's one of the things that worries me when Bernie wins, is that we can say everything we want to right now about what he's going to do and exactly how he's going to do it. But who are you going to bring on your administration? That is massive, right? And if you're playing friends with the Democratic, because this is one thing that I worry about when he says, let's get back in the Democratic Party. So you're going to play friends with the Democratic Party, and then who are you going to bring into the White House?
Right.
Democrats, or at least not the good ones. Maybe not all bad ones. And you might be able to fill a couple of progressive positions, but you're going to fill every single position with an experienced progressive. It's literally impossible. They don't exist. They don't exist in DC. The experienced long-term progressives. You lose your job, or you become Bernie, where you're literally in your job and everybody knows who you are. But those are things that concern me when he talks about playing into the hands of Democrats. I understand from his perspective, but it's just the reality is a little bit different than than I think that he's willing to admit, or maybe he knows something that we don't. Maybe he does. I don't know. But what do you feel about the fact, and this is something I point out to people all the time, that it seems like Bernie's allies, his closest allies, whether it be Jane, Nina, Levy, anybody who talks to him regularly, it seems like they have a totally different tune on Twitter and the media than Bernie himself. And this is including his wife and his son. Do you feel like that is something cryptic that people should be paying attention to as someone who has worked for his campaign at a strategic level?
Do you have some examples?
So, for example, the Russiagate scenario, right? You were the People Summit. He tried that for all of about 2.5 seconds and was booed instantaneously. But if you look at Jane's Twitter, Jane's Facebook, Levy's Twitter, they don't talk about Russia at all. It's literally issue. Nina, issue. And so do you feel like he's perhaps making some rhetorical concessions to get the long-term goal achieved?
I do. I think that he's making some concessions in order to try to gain more political support inside the Democratic Party. In order to try to be viable, to try to be more viable if he runs in 2016.
Which I don't know why he's trying. He's already the most viable candidate, but whatever.
Well, that it brings up a good point. And so in 2016, Bernie kind of threw out the traditional political playbook on how you run a campaign. He started with no name recognition, no money. He didn't have the establishment on his side. He hadn't lined up, he hadn't spent like the past 4 years lining up, like Wall Street donors to cut him big checks and that kind of thing, and that's like traditionally how you run, especially, before and after Citizens United, especially after. And so Bernie showed rather that instead of playing the inside game, playing the outside game, and just appealing directly to what the people want, and not running a campaign, that's for the donors, but running a campaign for what people are calling for, in all of those issues that he ran for, that was the way to create this, that was actually explosively successful, more successful than even he could have imagined. I
feel like in a way it's over strategizing.
Right. So he didn't even think he could win, at that time. But we all discovered, that when he ran that campaign, when he raised $230 billion off of that, when he got 13 million votes despite, that when the Democratic Party had to come in and rig the process just to prevent him from winning.
Rig is an understatement. That's listen, and it's funny because did I talk about this yesterday? No, actually, I haven't brought this point up yet because I'm actually doing a show about it. So y'all are getting a preview. So you're well aware of what happened with the Tim Canova campaign and with the destroyed ballots?
Yeah.
A lot of people, a large factor that no one to this point has considered because we got so kind of fixated on that. Tim Canova was not the only one running that primary. There were a lot of names on that ballot, on those ballots. Namely, one Bernie Sanders, for example. This is a small example. So we know for a fact, like obviously they cheated Tim Canova, right? You don't destroy ballots when you don't cheat. Like with no total disregard for the law. You're like, fuck it, we just have to go to jail because I can't let them find this out. So with total disregard for the law, they destroyed the ballots. So if we know for a fact at this point that Tim Canova running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz was cheated. You think anybody in this world could really believe that somehow, some way, all the primaries were just ran? They were just straight and narrow. We literally know that he had ballots destroyed here. I heard that in California, they ended up finding out that there was some ballots destroyed as well. So when they're cheating for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is potentially the most unliked candidate in the district that I have ever seen. Nobody here likes her. She had to cheat to win. There were, I can't say the politician's name because these are politicians. They're currently running for office before they had their eyes woken up to who she was or who Hillary was. She told me, she's like, you know what? It does make sense that nobody likes Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's why every time I call someone's house to canvass or to phone bank for her, they either cussed me out or hung up on me or told me hell no or said some other explicitives. I'm so serious. It's from a politician who told me this. And so it's insane to me how people really believe that the Democratic Party in the majority of the country is going to magically start being fair.
Yeah. They,
go ahead.
Well, you must have seen the results of the Rules and Bylaws Committee hearing. And so the Unity Reform Commission, put out these recommendations, which were already a very watered down version of what should happen, if you were to actually try to change that. The
Unity Committee doesn't like to talk about that part though, but go ahead. They don't like to talk about that.
Yeah.
The watered downness of their suggestions. It's already bad enough that they failed, but they were also watered down failures.
Exactly. It was watered down from the start. It's like, even if they got everything that they asked for, it would not have made the level of change that you would actually need, to make in that party. I mean, in order to change that party into a populist party, you just have to just throw out the entire structure and remake it, which is why it's easier to start a new party like most people want to do. But anyways, the recommendations they came out, first of all, they said nothing about money in politics, and it's like, hold on a minute. In 2016,
I thought that was one of the main parts of their platform. They got rid of it.
Wow. No, in the Unity Reform Commission recommendations, that was even in the recommendations. I haven't even gotten to like what now, because now the Democratic Party is going through additional series of watering it down, and so. But this was the initial recommendation.
Oh my God.
This was the strongest version of them.
How did you find this out, if you don't mind me asking?
It's out there.
Because I've like watched all, because Nomiki, I mean, I'm not really a fan of Nomiki. I don't know. I don't really find her genuine, and I feel like she might be naive, and I think she's purposely naive. I think because at this point it suits her political agenda to have constant strife and then pretend like you're part of that solution. But every time I've seen her in an interview, she never mentions that part. She always says that the Unity Committee's put forth all these strong policies, and because at the beginning it was everything that Bernie Sanders was fighting for. I was not, however, aware that everything had gotten watered down. So essentially, they're just there for decoration, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I think they just used them as. I think they never had any intention of making real changes, and they wanted to use them as political props. And so back in December, when the Unity Reform Commission concluded, and, I'm sure most people who are listening know, but the Unity Reform Commission was supposed to be tasked with making changes to the rigged Democratic primary process and to the party itself, and so at that point.
Breaking news. We have breaking news, people. H.A. Goodman is debating Richard Spencer tomorrow.
Oh.
Yeah, that's breaking news. He literally just told me it's going to be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then I'll actually be on his show at 2 p.m. Pacific. So that's going to be an interesting conversation, I'm sure, after I watch that.
Oh, fascinating.
That's going to be fun. I'm going to love that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's breaking news. He just texted me.
No worries. H.A. is awesome. But yeah, I mean, even the initial proposals, they said nothing about money in politics, and they made recommendations that the DNC didn't even have the authority to follow through on, and things like moving towards open primaries, non-open primaries, moving towards that. They kept the whole bunch of super delegates.
What does moving towards mean? Hey, please make open primary. This, that goes back to the conversation that we had the other day, and I'll talk about that after you finish. But that's ridiculous. It also demonstrates that they have no idea. It's almost like these people were not really in politics before they got into that position.
So now the best part is that the Rules and Bylaws Committee met a couple of weekends ago, and they struck any kind of financial transparency from the proposals.
What kind of damn unity? They're unifying on the wrong side of the fucking fence. Oh God, go ahead.
Sorry. Right. So now Perez will remain in charge, of the party's financing entirely, because not even the DNC has access to the party's financing. It's just the chair, which is ridiculously centralized. But then they also turned down open primaries. They struck that. They also struck.
They weren't even for moving towards it. They wanted to make it perfectly clear.
Exactly. They had proposed a commission, also an omnibus, who was going to be sure that the party stuck to its charter and to its bylaws. And so they struck that too. And so they said, no, we don't want anybody making sure that we stick to our bylaws and to our charter, which is ridiculous.
You can't, and they can't, like, they're trying to usurp the law is what they're saying. Because if you are a nonprofit and you make a charter and you don't stick to it, that is literally, 90% of nonprofit lawsuits are because they don't stick to their charter.
I didn't know that.
Yes, that's what. Yeah. So that's, oh Jesus, what the.
Yeah, amazing. I know. And of course, this is in the context of the DNC lawsuit, in which they violated their charter there. And they argued in court that they had they said that they had the right to rig the primaries. No, we don't owe anybody any impartiality.
My favorite First Amendment is what they said. It was the First Amendment. They have the right to do it.
My favorite part, though, was that they debated for 45 minutes on whether to say that they should reduce the influence or the perceived influence of superdelegates. And they decided on the perceived influence because they can't even agree on the fact that the superdelegates have an outsized influence. That
was the whole reason it was created, was to be the influence. Oh, Jesus. Look here.
Right.
Hey, Nomiki, if you're watching this, y'all need to tag her in this video. Tag her in this video right now. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, she has a Facebook too. She's commented on my page before. If you're watching this, you need to sit your ass in that chair on your side of the fence, whatever you are, and we need to talk because you've been out here making everybody. I guess that explains your recent transition into criticizing the establishment again, and that's cool. But we need some talk because, and the only reason I'm saying this, and I don't mean to caveat so hard, but I have a serious problem. One of my biggest problems as a journalist is that I can't deal with an insincere, disingenuous person. And what I mean by that is, don't you think that's something that should be discussed? Like, that should be national news. When the Democratic Party has a uniform commission, and the whole reason that uniform commission was supposedly there was to make legitimate change. Whenever they don't do something as simple as agree to take money out of politics, that's a huge thing. That should have been and this is why I don't agree with the media being involved in something like that in one particular party, because that's what she was in fact doing. Just like I didn't agree with the Justice Democrats. You're not in media. So I agree with that holistically. I said, who do you support? Like, Draft Bernie. Why not? Well, I'm not going to support the media propping up a particular party. I don't give a damn what they say the end goal is. And so I didn't hear about that from TYT. I didn't hear about that when she was interviewed on Jimmy Dore. I didn't hear about that from Kyle. I didn't hear about that from Jank, Anna, anybody. I haven't seen a tweet about it unless you saw something. Did you see something? Obviously, you looked it up, which is great. I should have. Yeah. But it wasn't. Think about it like this. I didn't know about it, and I watch for Democratic corruption all day, and HA didn't know about it, and he literally watched for Democratic corruption all day. That's a problem. And I felt like that's the problem with media being involved in something like that, because now your coverage is skewed because you've made all these promises and given us this idea that, oh, you're there to make legitimate progress and legitimate change, and you don't want your brand sacrificed. You know what I mean?
I know it is unfortunate. You really have to dig to find out what happened in the Rules and Bylaws committee meeting, because there was a huge round of coverage back when the initial recommendations were released, and all of the media was celebrating the Unity Commission and how progressives and establishment were coming to the table and they were making changes in the part. And so it's like they were celebrating as if it had already happened, though obviously that was just a recommendation. And now that those recommendations are, just like being watered down, it should be to no one's surprise. This is always what they were going to do. They were going to make a big media stunt of it, and then they were going to water it down. And in the end, they were going to just throw progressives a small bone and say, oh, look, we made the changes, come vote for us.
Then they didn't even give us the damn bone.
And give us your money. And so
give us the bone. That's the worst part. We didn't get the bone out of it.
They'll probably give us something, that like they haven't turned everything down. It won't be until the DNC votes on it in the summer or in the fall. Until we finally find out, oh, which bone did you decide to give us? Thank you so much.
Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fall, ain't that after the primaries over? It's after the primaries, right?
Yeah, after which one?
The 2018 primaries.
Right now?
Yeah, like when they vote on it in the fall, that'll be after the primaries.
Oh yeah, that will be after.
That's convenient. It's really convenient.
Exactly. Oh, it's the whole thing. The whole thing is a way of keeping progressives on a leash, you know? And so it's stay on your best behavior, progressives, and maybe we'll throw you a bone, as the DNC, essentially.
So this is what I don't want to run too long. I'm going to definitely go on your show too, because that's definitely this conversation is one that needs to continue. And I'm going to have you back on too. Yeah, I need to have you back on as soon as possible. But what steps have you taken, just specifically, going forward to move past draft Bernie now that that ship is somewhat, I want to say somewhat because you never know in politics, that ship is kind of somewhat sailed at this point. So what steps have you taken to transition the party into being active on the ground? Right. So we've become Movement for People's Party. And what we're doing now is we're opening chapters. We're launching chapters across the country. And so I was in Denver a couple of weeks ago. We launched a chapter there. And we'll be in Chicago a couple of weeks from now, launching a chapter there. And so basically what we're doing is, building up across the country as progressives, who are working on the issues at the same time as many other progressive organizations like Our Revolution DSA. But we also are defined and hold this core belief that real progress is going to come outside of the Democratic Party in the end. And so we're building that up as well. And so anyone who wants to volunteer can go to forapeoplesparty.org and join us there. And we have a whole bunch of resources to help people who are starting chapters. Another thing that we're doing is we're kind of identifying those states that are the most amenable for a new party to rise in first. So what, 40 of them? At this point.
Yeah, I think most of them, but there are some in particular. It's kind of a question of assessing which states are the most progressive, which states are the, have the.
Oh, you have a Miami chapter?
Huh?
You have a Miami chapter.
We do, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, good. You gotta come down here. We can do a little live stream speech. That'd be dope.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll put our folks in Florida in touch with you. Yeah. That would be great. And they're doing something also, which we're doing across the country, and that's holding kind of coalition events. And so inviting other groups to hold events together so that we can, get more on the same page, and so that people can understand that we don't have to, there's a better option now. We don't have to reform the Democrats. We don't have to keep crashing into that brick wall. Rather we can start to build the alternative. And really, even for those people who want to reform the Democrats, the worst thing that's going to happen is it's really going to light a fire under their ass, and it's going to make
them burn.
Exactly. Okay. It's going to make them realize, all right, now progressives have taken it to the ultimate level, and they're saying either change or be replaced.
So before we go, because I know one of the biggest critiques of people on the left about third parties in general is they're not viable because of the process. How you going? And you're looking at two people who 100% agree with you to a degree. We agree with you as in this current state, the electoral process is flawed against anybody, Republican or Democrat, who represents any type of progression or regression outside of the status quo. Now, recognizing this, that doesn't mean we should not start a third party. In fact, I think it means the opposite. I think we need to be doing a few things at once. Now, Nick, in all of his experience and really just thank you once again, because that's a lot of work. That's huge. It's one of the things I've always been scared to do, is to literally sit down. I'm like, okay, let's start third party, everybody. Let's do it. Like, that's insane. But Nick and I both agree that the electoral process needs to be fixed simultaneously. And so that had me talking about the fact, and this is actually why I wanted to talk to Nick much sooner, but both of us, we have our things going on. After I get the network established, after I got to get an intern to manage the site and everything like that, my next step is to start the nonprofit Legalize Hope, where our whole goal is dedicated to going to state to federal, in challenging the electoral process, in suing for a fairer electoral process, not during an election season so that it looks like political games, but actually like, hey, we need to re-examine this. And if you will not examine this, then we are going to make sure that you are put on the spotlight. That's one of the reasons that I started, one of the reasons why I started the network and wanted to have a lot of different people within the network, great and talented and popular writers, great and talented and popular journalists, so that, and thank you very much, Sabra. I saw that. He said, give Movement for a People's Party some Georgia love. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Sabra.
Right back at you.
Is that right? So I am going to be in the process of, I've already started it, and we already have like a few other people that we want running it. It's just a matter at this point putting in the time, the effort, the energy, and the money behind it. But there are a lot of people, like from the lawyers who are still working on the lawsuits from the primary on. There are political operatives who went in. There are volunteers all over there are people right now, and I think Nick would agree, that would be more dedicated to changing this electoral process than it would be for backing a candidate specifically, because they know just how important that is.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're starting it. What kinds of rules are you going to challenge first? Oh man, I actually have a list. The first things first, debate stage and ballot count. Or our name on, like, how many, you have to get a certain amount of signatures to have your name on a ballot. Like, for example, there's no reason that the Libertarian Party, the Green Party should have to get a certain amount of names on a petition. They're already well-established, well-financed parties. Yeah. The Democrats figure out somebody's doing it as a joke. We know they're being serious, and therefore they shouldn't have to. Right. Go through the same process. Like, if you got a certain benchmark nationally, then locally you should not have to run. Like, Michigan doesn't have that many Democrats all over the state. I would damn near venture to say that there are almost as many Green Party people as Democrats in Michigan. They're hurting in Michigan right now. It's not like it used to be. It's not like the union state that it used to be. And so that would be one of the first things that we focused on, which is ballot access, debate stage access, guaranteed debates, and then the election reform as far as ranked choice voting is concerned. And that would be, and then suing, and then we would go into the more, I think the more difficult things would be like suing from state to state for open elections and open primaries, even television time and exposure, money out of politics, things like that. Actually having the correct number of people in Congress, in the Senate. I think we're supposed to be at like 6,000 right now, but it's frozen, which is why we keep getting gridlock the way we do. Those are like, I mean, but we want to work from the inside, which is okay to a degree, but you have to work with somebody who really initiates something like that from the outside. Because like you said, these movements don't get started because of any of the parties. We put pressure on them. And so that's what we need to continue to do, like you have done so successfully with the Draft Bernie Party. So thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to go on to your channel also. Nick, do you have any last words that you want to say to the audience? Well, thanks for having me, Niko. And I mean, I want to say that we have this historic opportunity now where the majority of the country has woken up to the fact that the two parties, don't serve us anymore. And people are clamoring for an alternative. And I think that the question of, whether we should start a new party or whether we should reform the Democrats, is really something that only the progressive movement debates anymore, because the large majority of Americans, they've made up their mind. and I think they're looking to us for leadership on that too. So, so it's up to us. Mm-hmm. And the good thing is that we have this great momentum, and we should really take advantage of that. And that there are going to be more things, more things coming down. I mean, another recession, exactly. More things like that. And guess what the Democrats are going to do? The Democrats they're going to bail out the banks again. They just destroyed what remained of Dodd-Frank. They're going to, if Trump starts a war, you better believe they're going to sign on to that. If they're not,
they already tried to push him into a war.
If they're not dragging him into a war, exactly, they'll be leading the call. And so now you have the Democratic resistance to Trump is in so many ways, it's a resistance from the right.
Yes.
And so, I mean, why do we need why do we need the Republican Party? It's like we have two Republican parties at this point, and that's what Chomsky said. It's the U.S. is a one-party state. It's the business party, and it has two right wings, the Democrats and Republicans. But there's
they're not even a smart business, by the way, people. If you haven't noticed, all these these corporations getting shut down, they're not smart. They think they're smart because they can take advantage of Wall Street because it's all speculative. But you can't manipulate reality. You can't manipulate the fact that Walmart had to close a bunch of stores because the world is poor. And then we are forced towards your biggest competitor, Amazon, which none of us even like. But we have to survive. That's the only reason we shop with you to begin with. And so when it comes to a matter of survival, and you don't want to meet the bare minimum because they're overcharging for everything, which I'm sure they don't pay their employees. So when you make up, McDonald's and Walmart make up a huge percentage of people who shop at those individual stores. Their employees make up, that market of employees, make up the people who shop at those stores. Then they make them poor, and they're like, I just don't get it. Why can't we make any money? Why are we having to close down these stores? Maybe because you've literally made everybody poor who works for you. So,
right.
Yeah, they're not even smart. So I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. No, I think that we're on the cusp of a great change. I think that we will come to a kind of a catalyst moment, maybe the next recession, and it will become clear that things are going to change. What I think our responsibility is as progressives is to offer that visionary, hopeful alternative of what we can do. We just came out with our platform as Movement for a People's Party. You can find it on our website, forapeoplesparty.org. And I think, because if when we don't offer that alternative and we let the right wing be the only one who monopolizes populism, then we get Trump. And when it comes to that moment, when society when the pressure builds up to a breaking point and we have a kind of a catalyst moment, like a recession, then the direction of that revolution, when things change, whether it goes to the right or to the left, is going to be determined by the infrastructure that we're building today for an alternative, Absolutely. And so I definitely encourage everyone to come join our organizing family and help us start.
Real quick before we go, so tell people where to find you at on social media and your website.
Oh, totally. So we are Movement for a People's Party. You can find us there on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, and you can find us online at forapeoplesparty.org.
All right, I'm putting in the super chat right now. Party. You can find out all major platforms, all major social media.
Yeah.
Social media. And then I think Carolyn Wolf, is she one of yours?
Oh yeah, Carolyn. Yeah,
she's watching right now. She was the one who. Okay,
that's right.
I'll let her take care of it.
Exactly. She's our Southeast organizer.
She's around my way. Then she's around my way. So good stuff, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Hey, everybody, make sure that obviously you share this everywhere because a lot of people need to see this, but also make sure that you go to my website, www.mcscnetwork.com, to see other hot takes and interviews from people such as Tim Black, Holly Seeliger, BC DeGraff, Garland Nixon, and writing such as Caitlin Johnstone, Brandon Finley for sports, and Junior Smith for sports as well. We have pretty much everything you need on very unique takes from every side of every discussion that you could probably think of. And so bookmark that. homepage that I'm going to try my hardest to have the email subscription list and the text message subscription list tomorrow. So that's going to be fun stuff. And that way you don't have to worry about everything getting all suppressed, which we know everything now tends to get suppressed. So we're going to try to mitigate that. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, find your balance. Peace.